research on minor modifications you could make to the application process that might yield significant improvements in the diversity of the qualified applications that you receive. So I'm thrilled to be joined today by Alyssa Fishbane. She's Managing Director at Ideas 42, and she's going to share with you some lessons she learned through research that they did with the FDNY on improving diversity in the application process. We'll then turn to physical fitness assessments, and I will say that this is probably an area where we've gotten the most questions since we've launched the pledge from participating agencies. It's also the area that I think is most misunderstood by people who are not part of the pledge or the 30 by 30 movement. We have gotten overwhelmingly positive responses to what it is that we're all collectively trying to do here. But when we have gotten pushback, if I can put sort of not too fine a point on it, I think I can summarize it by saying people are concerned that what we're trying to do is lower the standards of what it means to be a police officer. And that's a deeply problematic assumption for a host of reasons that we don't have time to get into today. But I think one of the assumptions is that what we're saying is you should lower the standards of your physical fitness assessments and just make sure women can pass it no matter what those standards are. And if you've looked at the pledge, you know that's not at all what we're advocating for. What we're advocating for in 30 by 30 is that departments examine what it is they're assessing for. Are they assessing for the requirements of being a fair and effective police officer, full stop? And that's not just physical fitness assessments, that's across the board. And if a department redesigns their assessment process and they're confident that what they're doing is testing for what it takes to be a good police officer, and they still have an underrepresentation of women passing that test, that's okay. You have options. And there's other industries that have navigated things like this, like the military. And we have two of national experts to address these issues today. First, really thrilled to be joined by Irene Wong Chi from Cal Post. And she's going to speak about some research that Cal Post did to really get at what are the physical requirements for a patrol officer. There's not a large evidence base out there, and this might be something that you can draw from as you examine your own assessment processes in your agencies. And then second, I'm thrilled that we are joined by Yvonne Roman. She is the co-founder of 30 by 30, a retired chief out of Newark Police Department and one of the national experts on police physical fitness assessments. She's going to give you an overview of the space and really highlight some of the issues that are out there so you can sort of be aware of the context in which you're operating. And then she's going to speak to you about promising practices of what to do and how to support qualified women candidates through the physical fitness assessment process. And she's got some really inspiring stories of an organization that she built to address that very issue in the state of New Jersey. All right, well, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Alyssa, take it away.
Great, thank you, Mo, for sharing. And I will just open my screen. Can everyone see this presentation? Wonderful. It's great to see everyone this afternoon. And today we'll be talking about the science of human behavior, what we call behavioral sciences, and as already previewed, how small changes, some small things that hopefully you will recognize that can be done immediately in your departments can have outsized effects on increasing diversity. And so at Ideas 42, we work with the science of human behavior, which is really a confluence of different disciplines from psychology and economics and others, and use that to better understand what are the barriers in preventing a certain goal, in this case, more women from being part of the force and remaining there, and designing for those. And so we're a nonprofit. We work across the country in a number of different jurisdictions with police departments, courts, probation offices, sheriffs, and many different agencies, really with the goal of using this knowledge to help build better systems and drive better impact. Oh, I apologize. This is a little crazy. There we go. It's not a webinar if your PowerPoint doesn't go backwards in the middle of it at some point. And what I'm going to talk about today is a project we worked on specifically about increasing the diversity of the workforce. And in this case, we worked with the fire department in New York, where we helped them design some new, really simple interventions and then rigorously test them to know that they were working correctly. And so to give you a sense of what that department looked like when we started the work, as you can see, here the goal was to increase both the number of underrepresented minorities as well as women. So you can see that the workforce at this point in time was by far predominantly male and predominantly white. In fact, an even higher barrier that I think many of you are facing right now with, 99% male in this case when this project started. And the recruitment process, will look very familiar to all of you. And in fact, police has even more steps here, but the similar having to file to take an exam, take the physical aptitude test, and some other steps along the way to becoming a firefighter. And so the goal was both to increase the number of applicants at the start of the process, so to get more people in and applying, as well as reducing attrition along the way of the application process, so that at the end, it was more equitable in terms of who was invited to be a firefighter. And so here where we worked with them, they were already devoting a lot of resources to increasing the diversity. And so I want to be very clear, this is not the only thing that was happening on the ground. There were some very, traditional usual approaches of increased outreach in communities of color, increased outreach through different methods. And so this was really to add on to the work that was already being done. And so here we started from the very beginning, which is how do we increase the filing rates of those who are applying to take the written exam? So when we dove deeper into this, we did some research. We took a step back and we spoke to candidates who expressed interest. We looked at all the research that had been done to date on issues similar to this, taking exams, and spent time with the recruitment team at FDNY and uncovered a number of things. But the one I want to talk about today is particularly rooted in the fact that, the cost of the exam, right? There's a small cost. In this case, it was $30 to file for the exam. And this was becoming a barrier for women and for other underrepresented groups. And the reason it was becoming a barrier is because if you're unsure about how you may do in the exam, then all of a sudden these very small things, these very like a fee, like some extra steps they have to take, can feel like a reason not to move forward. And this aligns with previous research that's been done in the past in the field of psychology that shows that these small little steps, like paying a fee, if you are unsure, are going to encourage things like negative self-talk. They're going to reduce your motivation to move forward. And they're going to significantly discourage members of underrepresented groups from achieving positive outcomes. So knowing that this is what we were finding when speaking with folks, and then also that this matched really the research done to date, more generally, we use this as a jumping off point to design an intervention where we simply, really so simple, we just waived the fee for some applicants. And so we wanted to test this rigorously to know whether it was working or not, to actually bring in a greater diversity of applicants. And we did that by taking a lottery of, we selected over 1,000 candidates, and by lottery choice, randomly, they were given either an invitation to file for free or not. And so to give you a sense of what that looked like, we designed the filing emails and flyers for FDNY. So you can see they look exactly the same. They've actually been designed with other features of behavioral science to help people move forward, and some easy action steps, some opportunities to make it easy to file with links. But the big difference here was one of them, the one on the left, made it very clear that it's for free and that they've been chosen to receive an automatic fee waiver. So that was the only difference in the outreach. And you can see that this was effective. It was effective, if we look at all candidates, it was a 36% increase just by waiving this fee in the amount of people who filed. But most importantly, we saw an 84% increase in the number of Black candidates who were signing up for the test. We did not see a change with Latino candidates. And again, we saw female candidates were 83% more likely to sign up. So these results are really interesting because they show that something as simple as that, by eliminating this fee, we can have a much greater diversity in who is actually filing for this exam, just that first step to get people in the door. And when we look at this at scale for the fire department in New York, we're talking about over 1,400 additional underrepresented candidates that are filing per exam offering, which goes an enormous way into actually starting to meet your diversity goals when you have this significant number of additional candidates. Okay, so we've gotten more people in the door. What are some simple things we can do to actually get them to the next step, showing up to the exam? Now here, we did something really simple. There were already, we just tested different channels, right? So instead of simply doing an automated voice response phone call happening to remind people of the test, we also tested email reminders, text reminders, and sending emails and texts together. And so as you can see an example on the right, pretty simple, just reminder of all the key information, where to go and when, and helping them to plan to get there. And the question is, what is the most effective channel to actually deliver these reminders? Because we want to make sure that however we're doing something, we're doing it in the way where we're actually reaching the most amount of people. Now here, what was interesting is it was a combination of the text and the email sent together that best boosted rates of people actually showing up for the exam. And so we saw this increase across all groups, no matter the demographic. So this is helpful for any candidate you have coming in. But it also specifically is helping the women and other underrepresented groups come in as well. So we just want to make sure that we're not only getting them in the door to file, but they're actually showing up and taking the exam. And you'll notice here, we're speaking about increasing the number of women officers, that appearance rates in this case were still the lowest among women. So the combination of these two is the most effective. And at scale, again, we're looking at, what seems like just a small, simple thing to do, all of a sudden ends up in another, 262 female candidates that are showing up to take that exam and moving along in the pipeline of the hiring process. And then again, overall, 2,000 additional underrepresented candidates who are appearing and taking the exam. So what does this mean in policing? I'm sure you've already, noticed the overlap between FDNY and the different police departments. But, I think there's a lot of different ways we can be thinking about these really simple changes. So obviously filing for the exam and the application fees, things like claiming residency points, thinking about how to, making sure people show up to every exam, whether it's a written exam, a medical, the psychological exams. Thinking about, we're going to hear some really fantastic work around the physical tests, but, there's some ways that this can also be augmenting programming to, plan and train for those. And we don't have to only think about this for hiring, we can be thinking about this for promotion. So how do we help people thinking about planning, preparing for, and showing up for promotion exams as well? So we wanted to share these today because while there's a complexity of things that can be done and are important to be done to increase the number of women on the workforce, these are things that are just so easy to do right away. You can take them, you can adopt them right away, and at very little cost for you. And so if you have any questions about this or you want to learn more, please feel free to contact us. This is my email address, and this is my colleague as well at Ideas 42. We are 100% happy to help with whatever you're interested in working on, whether it's this or anything else around trying to change human behavior and decision-making throughout the process. But I would like to make a suggestion on one thing that would be really a way to get started on this today, in addition to being able to use these interventions right away, is you can begin, if you're tracking the data by demographics as people are applying, and as well as they are going through the entire hiring process. Is if you can track it by demographics, this is so important, because to be able to solve problems carefully, we need to be pinpointing where the specific area is that we are struggling to get enough women in and where they are dropping off specifically. And so with this data, we can then tailor interventions specifically to those pain points. And so I really, I know this is part of the commitment for 30 by 30. And so just really wanted to encourage that, because what's exciting is the data is really power. And with that, really be able to make sure that we're focusing in the most effective way in addressing this issue. So thank you very much.
Alyssa, thank you so much for that. I'm always blown away by the simplicity of that design and how powerful the results were. And for folks who've taken a gander at your pledge recently, you will see that exactly what Alyssa suggested at the tail end there. So tracking demographic information of applicants throughout the application process is one of the aspirational goals. And it's a great way to understand, if you are going to make minor modifications to the application process, what are areas where you should focus on making that change and measuring results. So Alyssa, thank you so much. Really fantastic work. Alyssa unfortunately has to jump off at 3:30, so won't be able to join us for the Q&A, but she said to absolutely send your questions if you want to throw them in the chat, and I'll make sure that she gets them, and we'll send out a follow-up email with any clarifications or additional information that might be helpful to you. Thank you again, Alyssa. Really fantastic. We're going to turn now to physical fitness assessments, which I suspect is maybe top of mind for some folks on the call. I've asked Yvonne Roman to really kick us off with an overview of the issues around physical fitness assessments. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend looking up Yvonne's TED Talk, and I'll make sure that we post it in our resources page on 30 by 30 as well. But it does a fantastic job of really laying out the complexity of the issue and a lot of the reasons beyond just representation of women in the department, why it's deeply problematic. So Yvonne, why don't we go ahead and turn it over to you. From Yvonne's overview, we'll go to Irene for an overview of the types of physical fitness assessments that have been scientifically linked to requirements of patrol. And then we'll go back to Yvonne to close us out with some promising practices for improving your representation of women and passage rates in the physical fitness exam. So Yvonne, it's all yours.
Okay, so share my screen and view. Okay. So thanks, Mo. I got involved with this when I realized that 60 to 80% of the women in my own agency were failing the police academy. And I really couldn't figure out why, because when I first started policing, that was unheard of. No one failed for physical fitness. So I started conducting research, and what I found was that the number of women in policing in the United States has stagnated around 12%. It's hovering around 13% now, but that number hasn't changed much between the past 20 and 25 years. And when I looked at recruiting, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, they track recruiting through the police academies. There's a census that they do every 4 or 5 years. And then the last one that came out was in 2013. But if you see, starting in 2002, the number of women that were actually recruited is going down. So 2002, and then it dips again in 2006, and it dips again in 2013. We found that it was hard to pinpoint exactly nationwide what was going on, because there's 18,000 different police agencies, there's 750,000 police officers, and because of home rule, each state can set its own hiring standards and academy requirements. So there's a huge variety. in what types of physical fitness tests they give and what the requirements are. So how do we compare to other countries? So Canada has 23%, the UK has 29%, and New Zealand, they're at 32%. And they have a goal of reaching gender parity by 2025. And they're really doing a great job. The last class that they put in, they actually had half of the class be female recruits. So that was their goal, and they were able to reach that as far as the academy class recruitment. So then I was looking to see nationally what we were losing recruits for what reason. So if you look at the physical fitness standards, about 18.9% of the men that are dismissed from academies are for physical fitness, but for women, it's 24%. But also when you look at academics, you lose 37% of the number that are dismissed for men are for academics versus 24%. What was interesting was the disciplinary reasons. So 4.2% of the women that are dismissed are for disciplinary reasons, but more than double are lost for men for the same reason. So you may ask yourself, well, what does the law say? So the first case touching on this was actually Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This was her decision in 1996. And she said that this was regarding the Virginia Military Institute, and they had a separate academy for the women, and it was kind of second tier. The best instructors were for the men in their academy, and then they had a separate one for the women. So she said admitting women to the VMI would undoubtedly be a hardship for them, right? They would have to create locker rooms. They would have to make sure that there was separate barracks. But she said that you can't exclude females just because it's uncomfortable, or just because you may have to invest in creating different barracks for them. They have to have the same opportunities that the men have. And she touched on the physical fitness, right? And she said that though women may have a different physiological differences, that's not a reason to exclude women from the training, that they must celebrate the difference between men and women and not use it to denigrate members of the opposite sex. Then there was a case law in 2016, it's Bauer v. Lynch. And this one, so some agencies asked, do we need to change our physical fitness standards so that we have different standards for men versus different standards for women? And the courts haven't said that you need to do that. What they require is that the test be validated as being work-related. And if you have one gender fail at less than 80% the male rate or the other sex, then it has to be validated as being work-related. And if it hasn't been validated, then you don't have a grounds to defend that test, and just based on the numbers, you'll lose the case. So in this instance, the FBI had training that was separate for men and for women. There were different requirements. And a male applicant, he sued because he couldn't meet the male standard for push-ups. And he said that it was unfair that women had a lower standard. And there, the courts, they upheld that because it had been validated that both the men and their women were meeting the requirements for the job. So the FBI had validated the test as being work-related, and they chose that test because they wanted to ensure that women didn't fail at rates that were higher than the male rates. So the courts upheld having different standards. What's interesting though is that when you speak to women, they don't want that because they find that it'll become more difficult for them once they get into the work environment. Men will tell them, you didn't pass the same standards that I did. So based on survey data, women prefer to have the same standards as the men. So that makes validation even more important, that it has to be work related. So when you have instances where the test isn't validated, there's a multitude of organizations that will be there to monitor that, and that can put actions against the police agency if they violate the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And they're the ones that have standards against the individuals failing at different rates based on the groups that they belong to. So you could either be in violation of the Civil Rights Act, of the EEOC, the Civil Service, or the merit systems. So the Department of Justice can initiate an investigation against you for civil rights violations, or the EEOC. Together, they did a report in 2016 about diversifying law enforcement. And what they found is that there's an overemphasis on the physical fitness that leads to female applicants being eliminated. And they're administered in a manner that fails to account for the improvements that will result from training. So if you're testing in the very beginning, you're not accounting for the fact that when someone's involved in a physical fitness program, there will be a natural increase in their strength. And there's research that says that actually women make a larger amount of physical fitness strength because they start off with less muscle mass. So they'll make greater improvements by the end of the academy. So if you test up front, you're going to lose more candidates. And those agencies that wait till the end then have lower attrition rates for the women, because they allow the women to build that strength up before they test at the end. So they're also said in this report that when there's a large amount of women being eliminated, it's because that test hasn't been validated as being work-related. And usually there is no basis to defend the outcome, and it turns into lawsuits. So I was noticing that this was happening, and I spoke to Mo back in 2017, and she convened a group of women at IACP in October of 2018. And from that women's breakfast, we had a summit in 2018. And from that summit, we came out with a report called Breaking Barriers and Blazing a Path, that's available through the National Institute of Justice. And that set the framework for what we're doing right now. So thank you all. Mo?
Fantastic overview. Thank you, Yvonne. And just one more plug for watching Yvonne's TED Talk. It really does a fantastic job of going even deeper into the concepts that she just outlined for you today. So Yvonne spoke many times about the importance of validation. And one thing I want to acknowledge is we know that that can be really complicated, and to do it well, it's expensive, and it might not necessarily be in your budget. And the physical requirements for every different department may be different based on your mission and scope and authority and jurisdiction. But one place you could start is through the work of CalPOST. So they've done a significant amount of research validating the requirements of a patrol officer from a physical fitness perspective. And we are very lucky to be joined by Irene Wong Chi of POST to tell us all about it.
Great, thank you, Mo. I have a PowerPoint presentation as well. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you all see that? Wonderful. Well, my name is Irene Wong Chi, and I'm an examination and research consultant with the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, also known as POST. POST sets the minimum selection and training standards for California law enforcement. I actually have 3 different studies that I wanted to speak about today because they all involve the physical activity tasks, and they were all analyzed by gender. The first study was the California Peace Officer Job Analysis, which I completed in August of 2016. The purpose of a job analysis is to identify and define critical job activities and job tasks performed by entry-level peace officers in the state of California. This particular job analysis was focusing on the entire job. So it was very broad and general in nature, as it incorporated 278 job tasks in 13 different content areas. Now, one of the content areas that I researched was the physical activity and use of force. Here you have 24 very basic physical abilities tasks. So for example, task 185, engage in foot pursuits. Task 198, drag and or pull hard to move objects or persons. Task 207, climb stairs. 208, maintain physical fitness. So you can see they're very general and broad in nature. I was trying to focus on the general physical activities that are important for patrol performance. Now, all of the officers that took the survey rated these task statements, all 278 of them, on 2 rating scales. They were frequency and importance. For frequency, they were asked to assess how often they performed this particular task in their current job. And for importance, they were asked how important is performance of this task in their current job. I did a breakdown of gender comparisons specifically for the physical activity and use of force task statements. Results showed that 1,052 males completed the survey, which was roughly 85%. 183 females completed the survey, which came to about 14.8%, almost 15%. These numbers closely resemble the percentage of women currently in law enforcement. So in that respect, I was confident that women were adequately represented in the survey based on the proportion of women in the field. In terms of comparisons, there were no significant differences in the results in regards to mean frequency, mean importance, and mean critical task index. And I hope you can see this. I was trying to get the whole table onto one slide, so I apologize if it's a little bit small. But the first 2 columns here is the mean frequency, males versus females. So for mean frequency, on a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being does not apply and 5 being very important, the average was 2.08 for males and 1.97 for females. And if you just kind of eyeball the comparisons between the 2 columns, you can see they're kind of very close. Same can be said for the mean importance. And again, that was based on a 0 to 5 rating scale, 0 being non-important and 5 being critically important. Males rated engaging for pursuits 3.63 versus females 3.64. Again, looking down the columns, they're very close. The last 2 columns indicate the mean critical task index, and that's a computation or product of multiplying the mean frequency by the mean importance. So basically, if you take the first line, engaging for pursuits 2.08 times 3.63, you get roughly 7.55, give or take rounding. And the same for females, 1.97 times 3.64 is roughly 7.18. So eyeballing the 2 columns together, you see they're very similar. Sorry about that. This slide here is basically the same results from the previous slide. It's just presented in line graph form. You can see that males and female officers were almost identical on how they rated each of the task statements. So whereas my study was more general and broad in nature, the patrol officer physical demand study was a different study that was done. It was completed in 2019. It was conducted by 2 former post colleagues of mine. They thoroughly researched the physical demands tasks in greater and more specific detail. The purpose of their study was threefold. First, it was to provide a foundation for assuring that the tasks simulated in the work sample test battery are still performed by patrol officers. To assure that the physical conditioning program in the regular basic course focuses on those physical abilities that are necessary to perform the physically demanding aspects of the patrol officer's job. And then last but not least, to develop a pre-academy fitness test, which can reduce academy injuries and attrition. Essentially, the purpose of their study was the foundation or the catalyst, if you will, for future work. It's a basis from which to determine if changes are needed to be made in the testing and training avenue. In their study, they focused on 49 physical demand tasks. They used 3 rating scales. They also used frequency and importance, but they, like as I had in mind, but they also included time spent. And so that was assessing the amount of time spent performing each of the physical tasks. In their study, they had 12% of females completing the survey and 88% of males completing the survey. They also found no meaningful differences between task frequency, importance, or time spent across any of the breakdowns reported. So essentially, for the 49 physically demanding tasks performed by patrol officers, they were the same regardless of agency size, agency type, or current assignment, time and assignment, present rank, shift worked, or gender. They also discovered that there are 9 physical abilities, and they linked these 9 physical abilities to the 49 physical demanding tasks. These 9 are aerobic capacity, anaerobic capacity, muscular strength, muscular endurance, power, flexibility, balance, stability, and agility. And finally, they also came up with 13 physical ability tests that they recommended should be validated to predict performance of the physical aspects of the patrol's officer's job. So if the field wants to pursue a pre-academy fitness test, these are the 13 tests that were recommended, but they still need to be validated for predictability. So if you could see, push-ups would assess muscular endurance. The 300-meter run would assess anaerobic capacity. The balance test would assess balance and stability. The work sample test battery is the basic course graduation standard. It's not a pre-academy selection test. It's designed to reliably simulate 5 physically demanding patrol officer job tasks, which were found to be common and critically important in all California law enforcement agencies with patrol functions. So the 5 simulated tasks are a 99-yard obstacle course, a 6-foot solid fence climb, a 6-foot chain link fence climb, a 32-foot, 165-pound body drag, and a 500-yard run. What this study found was that the work sample test battery needs to be re-examined. The distances ran in several of the events should be reviewed and possibly changed because they are different than those reported by survey participants. In addition, the weight utilized in the body drag is at odds with the weights recently reported of average adults in the United States. So those 2 things will need to be reevaluated. The third study I wanted to talk about was just completed 2 months ago in March 2021, and that is the Assembly Bill 332, which mandated that posts collect data on academic testing, remedial training, and retest practices in the intensive regular basic course. The bill required the collection of comprehensive data to address the various mandated information, AB 332, including gender and race of each student in relation to the success rate of the RBC Academy. Data was collected for 1 full year from July 2019 to July 2020. One of the tests that was among the, one of the tests that were collected for data was the work sample test battery. Results showed that 96% of females passed the work sample test battery after the initial test. 2% failed the initial test, but then passed after remediation. And says 0%, that's because 2 individuals failed initially and then failed again after remedial training and the retest, versus 99% of males passing the first time. So 96 versus 99. So again, there was no significant gender differences in regards to failing the work sample test battery in the academy. In conclusion, for the 3 studies that POST conducted, the very general California Peace Officer Job Analysis, the more specific Patrol Officer Physical Demand Study, and then the AB 332 study, there were no significant differences in gender. However, what the Patrol Officer Physical Demand Study did find was that there needs to be an update to the work sample test battery, specifically reevaluating the distances run and the weight of the body drag. For the physical conditioning program, the structure of the program was updated in 2012 here in California, but it will need to be reevaluated again to see if the program still focuses on those 9 physical abilities that are necessary to perform the physically demanding aspects of the patrol officer's job, and then to develop and validate a pre-academy physical ability test if the field decides to pursue this. So kind of re-emphasizing what Yvonne said earlier, all of this is done for validation. In the testing world, we have to make sure that all our tests have good content validity, meaning that the content of your test matches the content of the job. And we do this by making sure everything is linked and that everything is linked back to these job analyses. And that's how we ensure test validity. And that concludes my presentation, unless anyone has any questions.
Irene, fantastic. Thank you so much. If you can stick around till the end, we'll probably hold questions to the end because I have a feeling they'll sort of be interdependent on the different presentations. And just a reminder, so everything that Irene presented about today, those reports are publicly available online. I'll make sure that when we disseminate the recording of this webinar, I also disseminate links to those reports so you can see the specifics of what she mentioned and determine whether or not it will be helpful to you as you explore your own assessment processes. All right, so I wanted to end on a promising practice as we have been trying to do at the end of all of these webinars and kick it back to Yvonne. So say, for example, you're in a situation where you have a validated assessment, but you're still losing a disproportionate amount of women, particularly if your physical fitness assessment happens before entry into academy. Yvonne is just going to chat through some promising practices and what she did on her own to establish a solution for the state of New Jersey.
There's many reasons why women are underrepresented. I focus on the physical fitness, and that's because that was what became most apparent to me when I was a captain in the Newark Police Department, and I realized that women were failing at higher rates. Now, in my own academy, the women were failing because they were unable to do the push-ups. And we were testing in the beginning, and they only had about 10 workouts before they were tested. And that's just not enough time in order for a woman that can't do a push-up on the first day to be able to do it after the 10th workout. So I was trying to get the academies to provide support for these women, maybe to run them through the paces before the academy starts so they know where they're deficient at and they can work at it. And they refused. They said that there were liability issues, that they can get sued if the women were injured, that it would open up workers' comps issues. So I was fortunate enough to find a grant that was available through a police union. And I convinced my police union to let me apply for that grant and to start what we called the Women's Leadership Academy. But we focused on what we saw was the problem there, which was the physical fitness program, the physical fitness and specifically the push-ups. So I partnered with the Newark Police Superior Officers Association, and we created the Women's Leadership Academy. I found a JPEG somewhere, and that's my logo. And so we announced it on Facebook. We announced it on Twitter, on Instagram. What I found, though I like Twitter and Instagram better, is that the people I was trying to recruit were more likely to see the advertisement on Facebook. So if you're trying to do outreach, I suggest that you see which one gets you the most bang for your buck. And for me, it was Facebook. So we advertised for about 2 months that we were going to have this initial workout and that we were going to show people what was expected in the academy. And we followed exactly the format that the academy was going to test them in, because what we wanted them to do was to be familiar with what to expect when they walked in, and then to be able to pass that test on the first day, not on the 10th day, because if they can't do it on the first day, on the 10th day, they're not going to be able to do it either. So this picture up on the right was the people that turned out for that first workout. It was a nice turnout, and they in turn went telling other people, and more people came showing up. And what I found as I did this through months and then eventually through 2 years was that it depends whether testing was coming up and whether academies were about to start. So it would ebb and flow as far as who was coming, and usually after they're done with the academy, they'll leave, but there was a constant trickle. And what I started with was just for Newark, because I thought, I'd do a study on it and just study specifically in Newark. But there was so much interest in this from women applying to all types of agencies, not just municipal, but sheriffs, FBI, the DEA, that I opened it up to whoever was willing to travel to this park to see me. And we wound up with great results. We trained people for the FBI, for the state police, corrections, and we have graduates from pretty much every law enforcement agency that I can think of. We then saw that there was interest in this, not just in New Jersey, but in other locations. We had a captain from Iowa State Police reach out to us, and he actually sent his only 2 female supervisors in the entire state. They were sergeants. And he flew out with them to visit us, to see how we were training the women, how we networked with them, what platforms we were using to communicate. We used the WhatsApp, and we made sure we held them accountable every day that they were doing their training. Because if they just came out on Saturdays to do these push-ups, again, they weren't going to build up the muscle mass in order to be able to do these push-ups that we saw was the main factor why we were losing them. So they came out, and I was praying, Lord, don't let the plane go down, because you lose the entire female staff in Iowa State Police. But they've replicated it, and actually they're having their 2nd annual conference, I believe this month in June. And Baltimore started it, and now through the 30 by 30 pledge, we're up to 84 agencies that have pledged to increase the number of women in policing. And we found, meaning the Women's Leadership Academy, that it was physical fitness, but there's a bunch of other issues that can go to contributing to the low rates of women in policing. So I'm happy to say that after the first 6 months of doing this program, we graduated 80%, a class that was 80% women, and this is them. So this is the entire class, but all you see is females, because the class was predominantly female. And so this shows that if you just invest in mentoring them, in training them, they can pass this. The physical fitness test wasn't changed. Though the test may not pass a validation if they were challenged, these women trained to pass the test that everyone else passes, and that's what they wanted. And by meeting me on Saturdays, by being mentored by police officers on this WhatsApp group, by us holding them accountable, they had to post their push-ups every day, they were able to pass this test. So if agencies are saying that, they want to recruit, there's simple, no cost to low cost actions that they can take to increase the number of women in policing. This was me showing up in the park on the weekends. The grant that I got was for advertising on the internet, and we did a couple of networking things, but those were extra things that I wanted to do. The actual thing in the park cost nothing, and the WhatsApp cost nothing either. So there are things that you can consider to bring the number of women up in your own agencies. And it creates a network where they can rely on each other. They build relationships, and they go into the academies together, having someone already there that they know. So I found that it was very productive, and I think it's something that could be replicated very easily in other law enforcement agencies. Thank you.
Yvonne, thank you so much. I always really enjoy hearing you present about WLA, because I always hear about a different aspect of the program that's beneficial. Like the mentoring component was a little bit, wasn't on my radar, but I realized just how deeply important that is for making a difference in whether or not they're able to go through the process. I noticed that the captain that you mentioned from Iowa State Patrol is on the call. Ken Clary is now the chief at Bellevue. And I have to say, so Chief Clary has been one of our hugest supporters and advocates of 30 by 30, even before we got the initiative started. And Chief, not to put you on the spot, but I'm wondering if you'd share a little bit about your experience of sending the 2 women officers that you had out, and what you were able to achieve after they connected with Yvonne.
Yeah, it was, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the meeting today. Yvonne, you're amazing. Mo, you're amazing. I appreciate you guys leading this effort. Obviously, it's long overdue, but yeah, we took the opportunity. We had support in the agency. We made the trip to New Jersey and met the recruiting group, and it was just amazing, the energy that they had, the passion that they had to fix the problem that they were facing. So seeing what it was they were doing, and it really goes beyond the recruiting. You're picking up relationships with women applicants early enough to help them succeed. we assumed from some of the research that was out there and some of the work that Yvonne was doing, that if we could get our hands on applicants about 8 weeks in advance, that we could get them in enough, make enough difference in their physical testing to help them pass. And then, it starts with, I think Yvonne spoke to it, is that relationship, setting up WhatsApp talk groups and, challenging each other on a day-to-day basis, posting proper push-ups or different physical tests throughout the day. You're setting up that relationship and you're helping coach and mentor them towards the goal. We really brought that idea back. But in order for it to succeed, I think you have to start with the relationships in the department. We had a department that is statewide. So we had women who wanted to be mentors, but they really had never had mentors themselves. So we really looked internally and started a leadership group for our women officers who were spread all over the state to come together so that they could network together and have a support group as well. So it was kind of twofold, starting from within, creating opportunity for them, and then asking them to do the same for women who are coming in the door. But I'm not sure, I've been gone from there about a year. I know they just had their most recent Women's Leadership Academy for the 3rd year in a row, allowing some additional training and leadership opportunities for the females that are currently employed there. I'm not sure how they're doing recruiting, but I will tell you, I've taken a lot of the things that I've learned and brought them to Bellevue, Nebraska as well. Happy to say that our newest recruiting class, although there are only 10 that we've hired, 7 of them are women, so we're 70%. We did some Facebook Live events, recruiting, which were extremely successful. Basically, we told the story to women and minority groups, showed them the pathway to be successful in the organization and how they would be welcomed, gave them kind of role models, if you will, that stood in front of the Facebook Live and talked about their stories and how they were able to be successful. So had great success in the number of females that actually applied. And what we found is when females apply, they actually settle out very high in testing. So we were able to hire a good number of them this time around. So I apologize for rambling, Mo, but hopefully that answered your question.
Not at all, Ken. It was all great and exactly what I was hoping that you would share. And congratulations again on the representation on your latest recruit class. That's incredible.